youth support rates among Japanese civilians is among the highest in the world. Now, we're going to eliminate that very option, and therefore, we're going to eliminate impulse. If we look at most of the gun crimes across the United States of America, it's not usually people calculating and planning much in advance to perpetrate a crime. It's not necessarily an assassination. If we look at the Colorado shootings or the Sandy Spring shootings, we have people who are motivated by sudden impulses of emotion, and therefore causes them to perpetrate much harm on society. Finally, it causes social tension. But eventually, they prove on their own that it causes a civilian arms race, and people are pitched up against each other to provide better weapons. They said it themselves. Finally, the second argument, very simple, about governmental responsibility. We believe that the government has the role of protection. The government has to protect citizens because that is the exact contract in which it is placed. That's the reason people have limitations on what they can do. If there is a high possibility that it will cause harm or ruin the safety of other people, if they have already proven that the gun is the best method to defend oneself, opposition would like to use that logic once again and say that it is a very potential harm to society that should not be on the table for options or for grabbing in the first place. Ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, opposition is asking you to question this. If our society had no option of choosing a malicious weapon to cause maximum harm to society, would society be as bad as it is today? If we look at the countries that have the strictest regulations on gun control, then the answer is already on the table. Thank you.
The speaker has spoken for 7 minutes and 59 seconds. 7:59. I thank the first opposition speaker, and now would like to invite the second proposition speaker.
It's important to believe that when individuals are faced with criminals who have the leverage over them, that they are forced to become victims through crimes. Although we might agree that police officers are capable individuals, people with high maximum training and people who are able to carry the job, that does not negate the fact that we think individuals trained and gone through our model will be able to do the exact same thing. Considering police officers who are not able to be there all the time in places where crimes are rare, in places where crimes occur instantaneously, we think your side loses a life before anything can begin to happen. With regards to that, I'm going to answer 2 questions before I explain to you why we think the leverage over potential crimes is important to the way we construct society, and it negates vigilantism and all those other things that lead us losing trust in the government. First of all, let's have a discussion about whether or not a society will be safe without guns. We must make it very clear, Mr. Speaker, we are also okay with Japan. We think Japan is a perfect model to show you that in order for us to give you a right, you must be of a certain character. Which means to say we are alright with universal background checks that make sure the people that committed the crimes in Sandy Hook and the Colorado Springs will not get guns because those people are not able to be given their right. The same way driving is only given to people who are able to carry out the restraint. It's not a right we give to everybody considering the account of capacity. But second of all, we need to make it very clear that on side proposition, we think that in order for us to negate the types of crimes that already occur within status quo, we need to have guns. Because both sides of the house will have crimes nonetheless. It's on which side of the house we're able to combat those crimes and have some form of leverage against criminals. Because under your side, the criminals will still exist. Under your side, they will still have those illegal guns or whatever you might have. On our side, on your side, citizens will be defenseless. On our side, at least they have a gun. They don't have to resort to a knife when someone is pointing a Glock at you. That's the difference, Mr. Speaker. You need to defend that. Now, first question, will society be safe without guns? Because he told us very simply that the United States of America, although we have a lot of police forces, it's not safe. We agree because the United States does not employ a secure gun model. We have the NRA lobbying against universal background check. In the United States of America, the control is minimal. That's why we think our model sufficiently deals with this on 3 levels. Number 1, in the event that people use it for methods that are not just, for example, to kill or to become a criminal, we will send you to jail. We think that's a high deterrent to people to use guns in the wrong manner. Second of all, we have liability charges, which means you'll be charged, your license will be revoked, and you will never get that gun again. Which means people will lose the sense of security we gave them in the first place. We think that's a large deterrent for people to commit those crimes to begin with. But third of all, we think murder has never been justifiable. As much as we can, the government encourages people not to commit crime. We're a society that has become like that. So we think there's a lot of deterrents for people not to be criminals. But there's no deterrent for us to combat the crimes already existing in the status quo. That's the difference we want to draw. But second of all, we think that the communal on the road and I don't have a gun, I become defenseless, I walk away. Because I know I'm not able to help that situation, I might as well walk away. You give this person the ability to step into that situation and make a difference. The same way we implement good Samaritan laws in a lot of countries is because we need people to have an active role in preventing harm when they can. We think this is an extension of state responsibilities. But the last thing I have to say is we agree governments have responsibilities, Mr. Speaker, but we don't think that responsibility is solely on the government. We think it's a shared responsibility to society in the event where governments cannot be there all the time. We think governments have always allocated this ability to other institutions. For example, we allow a lot of schools to have private syllabus because we think they can carry out the government's duty. We allow churches to carry out community services and for churches to have charity organizations because they carry out government duties where government cannot do their duty. So we think we've always expedited our services when we can, so we don't think this is any different from that. Second of all, do guns lead to us being more criminal in nature? Because they say, I might be a good citizen when I get that gun, but when I get that gun, I'm more inclined to be solitary, I'm more inclined to hurt the person. We don't think this is true for several reasons. Because although we think having a gun in your hand makes you more powerful, we think with power comes great responsibility. People understand the importance of having that gun to keep your neighbor safe, to keep your mother safe, to keep yourself safe. We think that's a responsibility people share very dearly. Let's have a discussion about my argument. Which will be about whether or not our side will have the ability to combat the leverage that criminals have in the status quo and why it's important the way we manufacture society. Because under their side, you're going to have vigilantes, you're going to have groups of individuals who will still possess these guns. You guys will have a thriving black market. You guys will have people who possess guns outside of state duties. We think you're never able to combat that because you don't give them an opportunity to exercise this right. And we think that's problematic for several reasons. Before I go into those reasons, yes sir.
So having the perpetrators of the reported Colorado Springs senators already cast those tests by the U.S. government, which are very similar to your model.
The United States government does not have universal background checks. The United States government does not allow actually the person who committed the crime, its handle was his mother's gun, so we think he stole that gun. With better regulations, we can combat those things. Those are not problems with guns, those are problems with regulations, which are things we can easily combat. That's not a problem. Let's talk about how we're able to have leverage over potential crimes in society. Because there are two ways crimes are committed right now. First, they are either premeditated, which means they are either attempts to rob a bank, for example, or attempts to a large-scale crime. Second of all, there are also crimes that occur instantaneously, which means if I see a woman wearing a lot of necklaces, which are of high value, I will go into that situation and murder. We think these two events require criminals to make a large cost-benefit analysis. What do I mean? This means the calculus of criminals right now is that I am able to have a leverage over my victim, so I'm able to commit that crime faster, easier, and the benefits are much higher. We think we massively disincentivize them to do that when the benefits are lesser. How so? Three reasons why. First of all, in the event where I don't know who's carrying a gun and who isn't, it is a lot harder for me to commit crimes out of reaction. So spontaneous crimes will decrease massively, which is a large portion of crimes in a lot of countries. For example, in the United States, 67% of crimes are committed instantaneously. They're not premeditated crimes, they're not large-scale crimes, their crimes are precisely for reasons that are instant. So we think we're able to combat these crimes that exist right now because it's a lot harder for them to come up with the same results when they know somebody's concealing a weapon or the person around them might be concealing a weapon. We think those crimes can be massively reduced. The second type of crimes, the second type of crime that will be reduced are the premeditated crimes. Because although yes, they might be able to think of those crimes, it's a lot more meticulous to carry this crime, which means to say there's a lot of costs that will occur, and if a lot of people have guns, you're obviously going to fail at that mission. So we think in the event where these things are possibilities, criminals will be deterred from either A, committing those crimes to begin with, but second of all, in the event where they are more meticulous, we think you give time for police officers to come to the scene, you give time for people to come together and fight for this crime. So we think us having a gun increases the time frame of that particular crime in a manner that's non-violent, number one. Second of all, in a manner that allows us to maximize. That's why in a lot of bank robberies, when there's a standoff, that's when police officers are able to come to the scene faster. We think that's important to the way we get people on the scene better. But second of all, in the event where crimes are reduced substantially, our side, or this side of the house, increases the trust on the states. Because in a lot of countries like the United States, the trust between the citizens and the state is minimal because they feel like the state does not have the responsibility to do all these things. But B, citizens are not according to these responsibilities. And what happens is, on our side, we will increase the reporting of crimes. B, will also be able to have better compliance with the law. So they'll be able to responsibility. We're supremely proud.
Speaker has spoken for 8 minutes and 30 seconds, page 30. I thank the citizens of proposition speaker and now would like to recognize the citizen opposition speaker.
Mr. Madam Speaker, fact number 1. The United States of America recognizes citizens' right to bear arms. Fact number 2. Korea and Japan does not recognize citizens' right to bear arms. Fact number 3. Korea and Japan have one of the lowest heinous crime rates in the world. As opposition, we do not believe these number of facts is a coincidence in today's status quo. When it comes to a matter of forming a healthier society, when it comes to a matter of forming a safer society, we team opposition believes violence incites violence, guns incite violence. Therefore, healthier society cannot be achieved at their end. Therefore, we're very proud to oppose. In today's debate, opposition will provide you with 3 arguments. First, speaker, we told you about the suicidal harms, how this becomes a race, an arms race to the bottom, how it incites social tension within our status quo, where individuals are forced to use violence as a method, as an end to resolve the conflicts. Second, we talked about government's role. As a deputy speaker from opposition, I'll talk about the third argument, which is the bad precedent and the burden shift that a government undergoes under this model. How the government is actually burdening the individuals, how this creates a bad precedent for further government action to protect individuals in our society. Before I move on to elaborate on such arguments, I have 3 major questions to pose to the opposition. The first is about their policy. The second is about the question about protection of victims and protection of society as a whole. And third is about government responsibility as a whole. The first question is about their policy. The first speaker of the proposition comes up to the podium and tells us he's going to have an extensive, heavy checkup where individuals, under regular routine basis, can be revoked of their license to possess guns. Then the second speaker comes up to the podium and tells us, first of all, that everyone will have guns. But second of all, she also tells us that this will become a society where guns itself is a prevalent method to resolve violence, a prevalent method to resolve conflicts on thinking on. We believe fundamentally, the proposition is wishy-washy as to a society they will create. They're wishy-washy as to the ramifications and the effects of the policy they will have. A second more important question that I want to tell you, Mr. Madam Speaker, is about the protection of victims. Which side creates a healthier society in today's debate? In this question, I'll have mainly 3 analyses. The first about perpetrators owning guns. Their analysis that criminals will always have guns. Second about how it causes more crime. And third about how it deters further government action. First of all, perpetrators having guns. So their question, their harm in today's status quo is that criminals have guns and victims don't. What we say as opposition is that criminals should not have guns. The government should enforce tougher gun control, tougher regulations so that no one possesses guns in the first place. But second of all, we believe that in deterring crimes in the first place, your grandma shouldn't be forced to possess a gun because the government doesn't really think about new methods to reinforce and deterring crimes in the first place. We believe that government, a responsible government, should enforce tougher punishments, should enforce tougher regulations to deter crimes in the first place. Individuals in Vietnam should not be burdened with the responsibility of security, of social security, simply because the government believes it cannot be achieved at their end in Vietnam. Second, more important question is that it causes more crimes. We have 3 levels of analysis in this subclass. First is about social kinship. Our first speaker in our leader of opposition told you how violence incites more violence. How it creates an arms race that forces our society to use violence or gun as a method to resolve conflicts. We told you in terms of forming a social atmosphere, in terms of forming a healthy social atmosphere, that message that our government provided was not a healthy message. My second more important analysis is this. In the POA, we talked about school shootings, and in the status quo, we see many mistakes that happen. Mistakes as in a child accidentally taking a gun of his father and shooting his parents. Why? Because he thought it was a toy gun. We see many situations where school shootings occur, where mass murder occurs in schools, because an individual, out of impulsive will, out of spontaneous nature of an individual, decides to go to school to shoot the teachers, to shoot the students out of indiscriminatory will. We see many situations where in our status quo, because guns are readily available, individuals can resort to guns even if it's not premeditated crime. Even if it's not criminals who have a specific intent to harm a specific entity. We see many situations where individuals resolve things like stress. Individuals resolve in spontaneous feeling to resorting to guns, to resorting to killing of students, killing of faculty members in our status quo. When this is a social norm that is created in the United States of America, we see so many cases where students and kids die because of guns in our society, because guns are so readily available, we team opposition was very proud to oppose. Third is that it deters government action. As we go further in our argument, we believe this shifts the burden of security to individuals level. Because the United States of America, as you talked about, because it has the reason why it has such heinous crime rates is because the government believes individuals should be responsible for their own security. And the government believes by ensuring individuals the right to bear arms, it has done enough. This deters further government action to maximize their utility, to maximize their consideration for deterring crimes in the first place. It actually deters and hinders governments to take further actions and provide social security at their maximum level. But further elaborate this in our argument. Second question of thinking is about government responsibility. So basically their line is that because government cannot be responsible for everything, because police cannot be everywhere, individuals should be forced to provide their own security. First of all, we believe the government should try its best. And the only way for the government to try its best is when individuals are actually threatened. When there's a social threat that actually perpetrates and discriminates against their victims. We believe the government is actually shifting their responsibility and shifting their burden by simply saying that because you can also possess guns, we no longer have to care about you. The second and more important aspect about this argument, about this justification is this. When it comes to a matter of social justice and social security, when it comes to a matter of your life and death and his life and death, the life of death of another person, we believe the government shouldn't be shifting that burden upon individual discretion. We believe that matter should be universally decided upon a government, and that should be the government's responsibility and the government's role to decide. We believe that should not be up to the individuals to decide whether they can shoot this person or not. Yes, ma'am.
Governments obviously have responsibility